In the fourth part, we will be speculating as to what the future holds. We have seen that there are many factors affecting Earth's climate, but regarding the question of anthropogenic global warming, there is one question that needs to be answered by climate scientists. Just what is the sensitivity of the climate to increased carbon dioxide? This is not a small question, as it involves everything we know about climate. Interestingly, a paper by Nick Lewis and Judith Curry was published in 2018 on this subject, estimating an increase of 1.66 degrees centigrade for a doubling of CO2. This is at the lower end of the IPCC range. Also, the result assumes all recent warming has been human-caused. If some warming emanates from solar variations or ocean oscillations, then the warming due to CO2 is bound to be less. What is interesting is that although these scientists are regarded as skeptics, they were funded and they were published. Hopefully this is a return to normal science where challenging the consensus is not prohibited. What does the future hold? Will it come to this? On the evidence so far, it appears that the least alarmist IPCC predictions have been closer to the observed outcomes, in which case, and bearing in mind that the world needs to find alternative sources of energy anyway, should we not be taking practical steps in the right direction without crippling our economies? In spite of the increasingly alarmist reports from the IPCC, it seems that governments hold this view, whatever they may say in public. With China and India ramping up the use of coal, small gains by other countries will hardly help, and real progress will only be made once fossil fuels begin to run out or viable alternatives are found. Turning the world back to its pre-industrial state is just not going to happen. So what is the technological response to this matter? We look first at renewables. New Zealand is in a favourable situation with 76% of electrical energy coming from renewables, including hydro, geothermal and wind. There is potential for complete elimination of fossil fuels in this sector, with wind supplementing hydro and geothermal, and natural gas only as a backup. Road and air transport are a different matter. We will come to that later. Methane from agriculture is a greenhouse gas contributor. Although it constitutes less than 2 parts per million in the atmosphere, methane traps 28 times more heat per mass unit than carbon dioxide. This provides a significant challenge to food producers, including New Zealand. However, the effects of methane, especially as regards dairying, has perhaps been overblown. Firstly, only 16% of atmospheric methane comes from livestock. Secondly, if you examine this chart, you will see that infrared radiation at the frequency of methane is already trapped by water vapor. So as long as water vapor is around, that heat is trapped anyway. Regarding electricity production worldwide, 67.5% is from fossil fuels, 20.3% from renewables and 12.2% from nuclear. It is hardly conceivable that fossil fuels can be replaced by renewables by 2055, and we still have to address transport. We look at these figures given by David Mackay in a TED talk. He makes the point that to provide the UK's energy requirements using renewables means covering most of the country. In short, renewables are not feasible in every country. By contrast, nuclear power, although it is unpopular, provides a reasonably cheap and compact alternative. Be that as it may, France obtains 79% of its electricity requirements from nuclear generation. A good case for nuclear power is provided in the second link to a TED talk by Michael Shellenberger, titled "Why I Changed My Mind About Nuclear Power." He addresses the number of casualties from Chernobyl and Fukushima, which apparently were much lighter than generally believed. However, the danger from accidents like these may be averted. Current nuclear reactors use uranium and rely on superheated pressurized water to cool the system. If the cooling breaks down, the reactor explodes, sending steam and radioactive material into the atmosphere. An alternative process uses molten salt instead of water in the process. If the system overheats, a freeze plug melts and allows the salt to drain into tanks, thereby stopping the reaction. Such a reactor using thorium was built in the United States in the 1960s. But the project was discontinued in favor of water-based systems which were already in use. Thorium is more abundant than uranium, and an advantage of this technology is that the waste product is radioactive for 300 years instead of thousands of years in the case of uranium. Interest in this process has been revived, and many countries are investigating it. So far we have been looking at electricity production. What about transport? We are moving slowly towards electric vehicles, but liquid hydrogen engines are also in use. Hydrogen, when ignited, burns to produce water, so it is an ideal fuel. Also, the petrol engine can be converted to hydrogen. Aircraft can fly on ethanol. Rockets use hydrogen and oxygen. Shipping may need to rely on thorium reactors when they become viable. Smaller ships can be powered by sails mechanically controlled. A new age of invention is upon us. The United Nations, if run democratically, would see first world countries being dictated to by third world countries. This is prevented by the Security Council and its 5 permanent members, each having veto power. Nonetheless, the UN can be effective in areas of general concern, like climate change. The structure of the IPCC involves a small team of contributing scientists supplemented by a larger team of policymakers. A conference such as that held in Poland recently would then have thousands of delegates. The brief of the scientists is to warn about what could happen. This is then all too often presented by the policymakers as likely to happen. The media then presents the results as certainty. Much of the history of the UN has been characterized by aid to be provided by the richer countries. Not surprisingly, the challenge of climate change has been interpreted as how much money the richer countries have to give the rest of the world to help them combat climate change. The South African delegate to Katowice, Poland, Derek Hanekom, expressed the general feeling. Speaking to the Mail and Guardian, he said, quote, "Commitments will be made, I'm quite confident of that. But what happens beyond that is that the commitments need to be honoured. Developed countries have to scale up their contributions to jointly raise $100 billion annually by 2020. End quote. However, the Third World has always benefited from technology which they did not have to develop. The same will be true of thorium reactors, for instance. The huge cost of development will be borne by the First World, and Third World countries will be the beneficiaries. The problem of carbon dioxide is fairly well understood and ultimately manageable. Another problem of similar magnitude, that of population growth, gets little attention. Here we see population growth plotted next to carbon dioxide levels. The two are not unrelated because a larger population requires more energy. But whereas energy supply is potentially unlimited, the planet has a limited capacity to sustain people. Sir David Attenborough sums up the problem succinctly. This concludes the series. Society works efficiently if scientists explore, the media inform, and ideas are tested by informed and open debate. On the question of climate change, this has not been in evidence.